Hey guys, it's me, Mrs. Vogel. So, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. What do you want first? Good news? Okay. So the good news is you are going to find out very soon how Ruby Holler ends. You'll see if all your predictions were either correct or incorrect. Now you want the bad news? Today is our last day. This is the last few chapters of our book Ruby Holler, and after today we will be finished, guys. So good news, bad news, I don't know how you look at it. And if you do take AR, I believe this book is, hope I'm not wrong, I think it's worth 6 points for AR. So if you're an AR reader, this will be great for you. Don't forget to go take your AR test at the end of all this, okay? So let's talk about where we left off yesterday. So we read about investments, and that's where Mrs. Trepid is all complaining about the kids and complaining about this and complaining about that. And he said, hold your horses. We've got some investments coming. Get ready for an amazing life. And she started thinking about that cruise and the pretty dress that she tried on, right? And then we talked about hospital talk, and that's where Tiller kind of was like grumbly and like, get me out of here. I want to go home. I want to be, back where everything's comfortable and back where I'm happy. So he also found out that his children were going to be coming home. Okay. And then we read Mr. Trepid's adventure, and that's where Mr. Trepid went out into Ruby Holler in search for the treasure, right? And he found a whole bunch of treasure, didn't he? What kind of treasure did you find? Do you remember? Oh yeah, all that nasty nettles and mashed up blackberries and mousetrap, but he did find something very interesting in his last hole. And what was that? Do you remember? You bet, it was stones or jewels. So that led us to our last chapter yesterday, which in fact was called Jewels. And Mr. Trepid was very excited about, Mrs. Trepid was super excited to have rubies and emeralds and diamonds. And they were going to take it to the jewelry store to see how much it's really worth. Okay, so that leaves us off with today. Today's first chapter, 63, called Mission Accomplished Cake. Tiller, Sari, Dallas, Florida, and Z were in the cabin kitchen, all tossing ingredients into a big red bowl. This is our mission accomplished cake. Needs a lot of good stuff in it. You see anything you want, you add it and dump it in. Florida added chocolate syrup. Boy, that Mr. Trepid was hopping mad when those lizards got him. Dallas drizzled some honey into the bowl. And what about when that mousetrap snapped? Man, I could hear him swearing all the way up to the barn.
Can't wait to get these pictures developed,
Z said.
Especially the one with him in jewels.
Jewels? What a foolish man.
How much did those stones cost? Got the whole bag for $1.99.
Z dropped a handful of pecans into the bowl. I do feel a tiny bit bad for Mr. Trepid. Don't you go feeling sorry for him. He'd stolen your money if he had the chance.
Putrid pincher,
Tiller said, adding some more chocolate syrup to the bowl. Z tossed a handful of chopped cherries into the mix.
So what about your trips? Your real trips? Guess you're not going on those, right?
Well, Tiller and I were talking about that earlier. Seems we won't be going off on those trips after all. Seems we'll stay right here in the holler. She turned to Florida and Dallas. I hope you kids aren't too disappointed about that. Dallas spotted a jar of peanuts, opened it, and dumped them in the bowl. He didn't know what to think. Part of him was relieved and part of him wanted to bawl his head off.
Guess I'd better head out to pick up Buddy and Lucy at the airport. Be good to have your own kids home, won't it?
Tiller and Sari nodded. It will, they said. Florida emptied the jar of chocolate syrup into the bowl. She reached across the counter for a bag of cookies, smashed the whole bag with the empty jar, and then emptied the smashed cookies into the bowl. Sari cupped Florida's chin in her hands. Honey, don't you ever let anyone treat you bad ever again. You hear? Sure, Florida thought. Easy for her to say when you're about to get rid of us. She pounded the dough with a wooden spoon. Chapter 64, Appraisals. Once again, Mr. Trippett had parked his battered old car several blocks away from the Cadillac showroom. He'd worn his best suit, unaware of a piece of bubblegum that was stuck to the back of his jacket, and that cornflake crumbs clung to his pant legs. The salesman who had waited on him before met him just inside the door. Mr. Trippett, correct? He shook Mr. Trippett's hand, but noticing the red rash on Mr. Trippett's hand and wrist, the salesman cut the handshake short. The red Cadillac convertible. Is that the one you're still interested in? The salesman noticed the tiny blisters on Mr. Trippett's face and neck. That's right, Mr. Trippett said, rubbing at the skin underneath his jacket. I just want to be sure it's available. Oh, so you made your decision? Yes, Mr. Trippett said, pawing at his ear. I'm off to make some arrangements and then I'll be back. How soon could I have it? Oh, do you care to discuss the finances? No, not now. It'll be fine, I'm sure. I suppose I ought to take it for a test drive if that's possible. Well, absolutely, the salesman said. He didn't think he should mention the gum on Mr. Trippett's jacket or the crumbs on his pants. The salesman figured that if a man wanted to buy a new Cadillac, he could have food all over him if he wanted. Mr. Trippett parked the Cadillac directly in front of the First Avenue jewelry store. The ding of the door's bell brought the salesman from the back of the store. Oh, Mr. Trippett, I believe. As Mr. Trippett approached, the salesman noticed the angry rash creeping up Mr. Trippett's neck and across his face, and the salesman took a step backward. He hoped that whatever Mr. Trippett had wasn't contagious. That watch I was looking at, you remember which one? Yes, sir, I do. Would the gentleman like to see it again? No, just checking. I wonder if you will also be able to do appraisals. Appraisals? Of jewelry? Yes, or gems, precious jewels. Mr. Trippett retrieved the pouch from his pocket and laid it carefully on the counter. I have here some gems that I'd like appraised. The man eyed the pouch. I would be happy to do appraisals for you. What sort of gems? Mr. Trippett raked at his neck. This blasted rash. Rubies and emeralds and diamonds. Rubies and emeralds and diamonds? May I? The salesman extended his hand. Mr. Trippett smiled as he carefully undid the pouch and poured the gems into the salesman's hands. The salesman stared at the stones and cleared his throat. Perhaps you would like to leave them with me. I will need to consult my manager. Fine, whatever, Mr. Trippett said. When do you think you can have a firm appraisal? The salesman dumped the stones back into the pouch. Oh, I'd say by tomorrow, no problem. And my gems, they're safe here with you? The salesman chewed on his lip. Oh yes, they're perfectly safe with me. Fine, very good then. As Mr. Trippett drove away, the salesman called to someone in the back room. Hey, get in here. Wait till you see what this joker wants appraised. A bunch of worthless dime store stones. Ooh. Chapter 65, Conversations in the Night. It was a cool night in the holler with a lazy breeze blowing through, whisking branches against the loft windows. Dallas whispered to Florida, Listen, hear Tiller snoring? And can you hear Sari and her kids down there? They're all still talking. Don't they know we can hear them? Florida was hidden under her quilt, with only her head poking out, staring at Buddy's and Lucy's suitcases sitting there on the empty beds. Tiller and Sari seemed pretty happy to see their kids, and Dallas said, Don't talk about it. They're probably sorry we're taking up space here. Did you hear what Buddy said when he saw us? He said, Who are those two kids? Like we're a couple of dogs. He didn't mean it like that. Florida had also heard Lucy ask her parents what on earth those kids were doing here. What on earth had Tiller and Sari been thinking? Anyway, taking on a couple of stray kids that they didn't even know anything about. Florida could hear Lucy's voice now, below, rising as if she were annoyed. You can't possibly keep them here now. Well, with Dad recouping and shh, lower your voice, please. But Mom, let's go outside. Florida heard the screen door close and then turned to Dallas. We're just in the way. I thought Tiller and Sari were different from all the rest of those troubled grown-ups, but they're not. Stop it. They are different. Don't you go talking bad about them. I could see whatever I want. Florida thought about Tiller lying in his bed downstairs. What was Tiller dreaming? What if his heart started hurting again? Dallas was out of his bed, rummaging around. What are you doing? What are you stuffing in that sack? I'm packing. Don't do that. Why not? Maybe you're right. Maybe our time is up here. They don't need us, and we're in the way, aren't we? Dallas put a change of clothes in the sack and then pulled them out again. What's ours and what's theirs? Is this shirt mine? Of course it's yours, Dallas. Whose else would it be? I mean, did they buy it? Or did we have it when we came? Let me see it. Dallas tossed the shirt at her. You don't have to be so rough. She was examining the shirt. It's a nice one. Definitely not yours when you came here. She tossed it back to Dallas, who threw it on the floor. Reluctantly, Florida eased out from under the quilt. I guess I've got to pack too. Well, I guess you do, unless you're not coming with me. What are you talking about? You wouldn't go without me, would you? Dallas sat back down on his bed. No, I wouldn't do that. Not if you wanted to come. And maybe you don't want to come. Maybe that night freight train doesn't sound so good to you anymore. It sounds good. It sounds just fine. I'm just tired is all. I thought we'd be resting up a few days. Florida was surprised at how much she didn't want to leave. No point in resting up. Might as well get moving. Are you talking about tonight? You mean like this night here, right now? That's what I mean. After Lucy and Buddy are asleep. But what about saying goodbye? We're not even going to say goodbye? It was nearly midnight when Lucy and Buddy crept up to the loft and Sari crawled into bed beside Tiller. She studied his face and listened to his even breathing. She sat leaning against the headboard, knowing she would have trouble sleeping. She'd been surprised when Lucy and Buddy suggested that Dallas and Florida should be sent back to the home right away. Could this be her own Lucy? Her own Buddy? So cold? So unfeeling? Then Sari told Buddy and Lucy about the Trepids and about the Hoppers and the Crambips and the Bridgertons and the Dreeps. She told them about Florida and Tiller fixing up the boat and about Dallas helping her plan the trip and get supplies and about how the kids had run through the holler and climbed its trees. Oh, Mom, Lucy said when she finished. They must just love the holler just like we all did. Oh, I dream of it all the time. And to be back here now, oh. Buddy was sitting on the porch swing, taking in the view. What a place this is. What a place. He took a hold of Sari's hand. But are you sure you can manage 2 kids right now? Are you sure you can handle something else to worry about? Worry about? Those 2 keep us from worrying. They're a comfort. But now as she lay in her bed, she wondered if it was selfish of her to want Dallas and Florida to stay. What was the best thing for them? Certainly it was not going back to the home. She was sure of that. And those kids, they loved the holler. They loved being able to run and shout. They loved the stream and the trees and the birds. She wanted to wake Tiller so that he could reassure her. In the hospital, he'd said one of the first things he was going to do when he got rested was teach Dallas how to chop wood and light the lanterns. And he'd go fishing with Florida and teach her how to swim. She heard Buddy and Lucy climb into their beds above, and then it was quiet, with only the wind brushing the branches against the house. Good night, Taylor. Good night, my handsome old boot. Florida heard Dallas slip out of the bed. What she really wanted to do was stay under her quilt and drift off to sleep and wake back up to the smell of bacon and eggs and waffles and syrup and honey and blueberries and everything sweet and warm that you could possibly think to eat. It's time. What's that? A note?
Yeah, I'll leave it on the burrow. I'm leaving that carving too. That leafy one? Okay, I'll leave mine too. What is it? A curly-headed bat.
She knew that bats didn't really have curly heads, but that's how this one came out, and bats were good. Tiller had said so. She watched Dallas stuff his old socks into his sack.
Hey, Dallas, whatever happened to your backpack and your sleeping bag? Lost them.
Dallas said, thinking about the two boys who had offered to watch his and Sari's gear. Maybe the gear was still there. Maybe he could find his way back.
You ready?
Florida asked, interrupting his thoughts.
What? Oh, yeah. Okay. Ready.
They slipped down the ladder and out the door.
Okay.
Dallas said, trying to sound more cheerful than he felt.
Let's catch that night train and ride out of town.
They had just stepped off the porch when Florida said,
Hey, wait. What about our money? Shoot. Z's got it, remember? Guess we could try and find his place and ask him for our money.
Forget it. You've got no dang idea where his place is. Money is trouble, Dallas. I don't want it. Dallas thought about all that food their money could buy, and his stomach rumbled in response. Maybe they should wait another day and get their money from Z. But they were outside, and they were on their way, and their feet kept moving forward. Across the holler, Z was in his own cabin holding a lantern in the middle of the main room.
What a pit. Maybe I ought to start cleaning. Maybe I ought to get some groceries. Maybe I ought to.
But he didn't do anything except flop down on his bed and go to sleep. Chapter 66, our final chapter, Dreams. When there was a full moon in Ruby Holler, as there was on the night that Dallas and Florida left the cabin, the purest silver light makes everything above and below look soft and rich like velvet. The birds sit quietly in the trees, and all the other creatures seem to move more gently, as if their feet are padded with cotton. Good smell here, Florida said as they picked their way along the barn. Good old barn, too. Dallas leaned forward to smell the wood, siding.
Let's follow the creek a ways.
They wound their way down the hill and moved slowly along the bank, picking their way over stones and around bushes until Florida said, Wait, stop.
What's the matter?
I don't want to leave. I like it here. Nobody ever treated us this good before, and nobody's probably ever going to treat us this good again.
But like you said, maybe we're in the way now. We don't have any choice, do we?
Who's going to chop the wood while Tiller's getting his strength back? And who's going to haul the water? Dallas saw himself, pioneer boy, chopping wood and hauling water. He saw himself stalking through the woods. And who's going to help Sari with all the getting over heart attack things she's going to have to make? Answer me that. Dallas stood there thinking.
I believe I'm getting a little idea. Are you getting a little idea?
Yep. Dallas glanced around.
Whoa!
He moved toward a tree near the bank, a tall one with long, leafy branches dipping toward the ground.
In here,
he said, dipping under the branches. Oh, it's like a fort or something.
I've had a dream about this place. Honest, it was this exact place. This leafy tree with the branches hanging down and the creek nearby.
What an odd thing that it's a real place. Dallas, let's camp here, okay?
You mean camp here
and see what happens. Florida spread out her sleeping bag and crawled inside. You gonna be okay without a sleeping bag, Dallas?
Yeah, I got this sack for a pillow, and maybe the crawly things will leave me alone for one night.
Dallas, are you hoping what I'm hoping?
Maybe. Let's not say it out loud, though.
And so they slept. And as they slept, they dreamt again of talking birds. Florida was paddling down the river on a raft when a meteor crossed the sky, filling it with golden light. And out of the golden light came a golden bird which swept down to Florida's raft. It said, You are my baby. And Florida put out her hand to the bird and said, okay. In Dallas's dream, he crawled out from beneath the leafy tree and stood by the edge of the clear stream. Soon a silver bird fluttered down from the sky and sat on his shoulder. There is a place where you can go, where everything is what? Where everything is magic, the bird said. Dallas touched its silver feathers. And that place is? But the bird merely tucked its head in its wing and fell asleep. In the morning, Dallas heard the birds calling and knew it was first light, but he didn't open his eyes. He held very still, afraid to breathe. Florida, too, heard the bird. Oh, please, she prayed, please. She scrambled out of her sleeping bag and breathed deeply. Dallas, wake up! Dallas lifted his head and glanced at Florida. Dallas, take a whiff. What's that you smell? He inhaled. It was the best smell in the world. Bacon. Welcome home, bacon. Well, guys, what did you think of the book? Did you like it? Did it end the way you thought it would end? How did you think it ended? And how do you think it would end if the book was to continue? Do you think that they would stay with Tiller and Sari? Do you think that Buddy and Lucy would actually accept them into their home and as brother and sister? Do you think that Z would try and get custody of the kids or find out if those kids were in fact his? There's so many things that could happen. I hope you're making predictions right now. And if you want an extension to what we just read about, I want you to write an extension to the ending of this story. So I want you to, based on what we just talked about, come up with a prediction of how this story would end if it were to continue. Where would Dallas and Florida end up? Would they stay with the Morris? Would they stay with Tiller and Sari? Would they end up with Z? What about Mr. Trepid and Mr. Trepid? What happens to them? So I would love for you guys to write an extension to this story. And in the comments, you guys can tell me kind of how your story ends. Summarize that ending for me. I hope you guys really enjoyed this book. Again, it's one of my favorites, and I hope it's become one of yours. And again, if you take AR tests for school, this is an AR book, so feel free to take a test on it. Guys, I will miss you, and maybe we'll read another story sometime, okay? Bye, guys.